Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me. I am not in my office in New York, as you can see. I am in southern Wisconsin. That's Lake Kegonsa, and I'm here to talk about the Rolex Explorer 2 reference 16570, the 16570, a watch that I think a lot of us are pretty fond of. I wanted to talk about the lasting appeal of this watch and how it seems to bind Rolex people, Rolex enthusiasts, sport watch enthusiasts, and even non-Rolex people alike as kind of the one that got it right. It seems to be the last true tool watch that Rolex made. And what I mean by that is that there's not a hint of pretension in this watch. Now, I'm always the guy that says watches are what you make of them, and I do believe that modern Rolex watches can be tool watches if you use them that way, and they make pretty good ones. But there's something else in them too. There's a gloss over them these days that some people kind of view as making them more of a luxury than a tool watch. The 16570 and a lot of the 5-digit Rolex references for that matter don't have that. They are much more straightforward in their utility, and they are more approachable as a result. Now, the 16570 was in production for a long time, from the 80s into the mid-aughts, and they can be had these days for $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. So not only is the watch itself a little bit more approachable, but it is accessible to a broader group of people as well. And because of that, the watch doesn't seem to have the same kind of status symbol that a lot of modern Rolexes have. It's not about that, it's about something else, and it's far more simple. It's a tool watch that can be used. This is maybe the greatest example of a 5-digit tool watch from Rolex. There's no bezel insert, which I think goes a long way in making this watch feel a little bit more relevant today than something like a Submariner or a Sea Dweller. The brushed steel 24-hour bezel makes a great impression without being over the top, and it holds up really well being a single piece of steel. And another detail about this watch that helps it fly under the radar are the size of the hour markers. And it kind of says a lot about the personality of this watch. It's everything that it needs to be, and it doesn't go a step further. There's no frivolous details in this watch. There's nothing that you might look at and say, that's unnecessary, or why did they do that? And I think that goes a long way in making this watch special. Now, if you ask me, there's a certain sweet spot for this watch, which is the latest production examples of the Lug Holes case. So this is the late enough production to get to the updated movement, to get a solid end link, but it still has the holes in the lug. And so this is a watch that to me is usable all these years later, and it still feels like a solid, well-built tool watch. As much as I enjoy some of the modern Rolex references, they come with a lot more baggage than this watch ever did. And I think that's one of the things that makes this watch so appealing to people that are into Rolex and people that aren't into Rolex, and just tool watch fans in general. It's got that vibe of old school Rolex that appeals to so many of us for its straightforward, no-nonsense approach. And that's something that I think a lot of us would like to see more of in modern Rolex watches. And I think maybe the closest thing to that in the modern Rolex catalog is the current Explorer 2. And of course, when it went over the 42mm size and it got the maxi dial and that orange hand, it lost a little bit of the simple nature of the 16570 that I think a lot of us enjoyed as well. But it's still a through and through hardcore tool watch. So I think for some, that is the kind of last bastion of the true tool watch roots from Rolex. Even though much of their lineup is perfectly capable, there's still something else about them that make them a little bit less approachable to everyday type general usage. And the 16570 has that in spades. And again, the thing I love about this is that they are so accessible to so many people today. A lot of them were made, and they can be had for relatively decent prices. So I think there's still a lot of enjoyment left to be had in this reference in particular. And another interesting detail about this watch is it seems to be a watch that people come back to. Now, because of its price point, I think this is a watch that people land on that are just getting into Rolex because it is accessible. So it's oftentimes the first taste of a tool watch from Rolex. And it's easy to move on from and find other experiences, but in time you always kind of come back to realizing just how special this watch is. And I find myself appreciating it a lot more the second time around, so I have no plans on moving this one out of my collection anytime soon. It's just that special of a watch. In recent reviews, I've talked a lot about how Rolex is starting to come back to some of the details that made some of these old watches so great in new modern iterations of them. So it's easy to imagine Rolex doing something similar with the Explorer 2. However, I don't think we'll see them come quite back to the dimensions that made the 5-digit references so special and so wearable. I hope I'm wrong on that though. I'd love to see them explore a similar case architecture in a modern guise. I think that'd be a really cool thing. But at the same time, I think that's something that Tudor really excels at these days. So there are options for people who are still looking for something like that and want to put these watches to use and don't really care about all the baggage of the status symbol around it or having an investment grade timepiece or anything like that. They just want to have experiences in the watches. And I think that's exactly what we love about the 16570, and it's something that I see in a lot of modern Tudor watches as well. But I'd love to hear what you think about the 16570. Why do you think this watch has retained its appeal so many years later? And I'd love to hear if you have any stories around this watch in your own collection as well. Be sure to leave that down in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in to this on-location shoot. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. And if you enjoy this content, leave a like, share. It helps me out a lot. Until next time, take care.